With this session update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. State budget officials presented the February budget and economic forecast to the press. The forecast shows a projected budget surplus of $1.5 billion for the 2020-21 biennium, and the budget reserve remains at its statutory maximum of $2.3 billion. Minnesota's outlook is expected to remain stable, although forecasters believe an economic slowdown is possible beginning late next year. Following the forecast, Governor Walz and legislative leaders responded to the forecast and took questions from the press.
Good morning to all of you. This budget forecast is good economic news for Minnesota. We must build upon the smart decisions that got us to this strong position. The last session in the legislature, we invested in our children's education. We protected Minnesota's access to affordable health care. And for the first time in almost 20 years, we gave 1.3 million middle-class Minnesotans an income tax cut on the rate. We proved we could govern together for the good of Minnesota. We've been disciplined, we've kept our eyes on the long term, and we've invested in the things that make our state grow. This session, we must come together again as one Minnesota to build upon the good work. We must exercise caution to protect our fiscal stability. We must pay back the budget reserves that you heard, and I hope after hearing the experts, there is still $491 million in the tails that are left, and I'd like to just note that the decision on the budget reserves was based on data. It was based on economic data over a very long period of time. The reason that we came to those numbers and the reason it's important to get back up before they were set, that's a 95% confidence interval to withstand stresses into our economy. Anything we do that's less of that increases risks to those basic programs. And we have a responsibility as the legislature passed and appropriated money to make sure that those programs are carried out. That's the way we can ensure we do that. We must listen to what our communities are telling us, and they're urgently telling us they need our support to increase access to safe drinking water and affordable housing, fix local roads and bridges, and improve safety infrastructure, and protect our lakes and rivers. That's why I've unveiled a $2 billion local jobs and projects plan that would take care of what we have, prepare us for the future, and keep our economy strong. Whether it's upgrading the deteriorating storm sewer system in Minneapolis or rebuilding the historic town hall that burned down in Ellsworth. These are the projects that improve quality of life for citizens in all corners of the state. We also heard in the previous presentations that our businesses are struggling to find workers. Investing more than $480 million in our higher education institution job training programs through the local jobs and project plan provides our students with a world-class education and develops the talent that Minnesota's economy needs to continue to produce results like you're seeing. We must pass the robust plan. There's no reason not to do it. We're at historically low interest rates, and the change in just from the November forecast to now is enough money to pay for the $2 billion bonding bill in and of itself. This session, we also need to tackle those pressing needs that face us today, like replenishing the disaster relief account, improving the safety of our farmers, ensuring Minnesota is prepared to respond to things like coronavirus, and making sure that all Minnesotans have access to affordable insulin. And we must think to the future by investing in Minnesota's children. These are the actions we need to take to make the state the best in the country for our kids, including ensuring every child in Minnesota receives a high-quality education, no matter who they are or where they're at. I look forward to working with the legislature again. Our top priority for this session is to get the local jobs and projects, the bonding bill done. It's to make sure we replenish our budget reserves, and then to think towards the future how we invest this budget surplus in the future. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Governor, you've been in office a little over a year. Can you take credit for some of this performance yet?
I probably should. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. It seems like it. I think what I'll take credit for is working together with folks who understand about stability. I think I was certainly standing on the shoulders of giants, and I will once again stress the decision in 2011 to put in the budget reserves and to move that money over was absolutely one of the smartest things that we've done in an awful long time. I will take credit for keeping us disciplined, for keeping a budget that doesn't overspend, to understand that if you do tax cuts, you have to pay for them, and to invest in the things necessary, working with the legislature. And I think they should be proud of what we were able to do to be able to continue to grow the economy. What we're seeing is, especially in the upper Midwest, Minnesota's economy is outperforming our neighbors, and that is because of these smart investments.
Governor, a two-part question. Is there room for tax cuts now? That's question number one. Question number two, What about a larger bonding bill than $2 billion given this additional surplus?
Well, yeah, and I think, again, the House and the Senate will work their will. I think there is an appetite to do a robust bonding bill, and I say that bipartisanly. That, and I think when you get the minority leader of the House and the majority leader of the Senate after you hear our DFLers speak, that I think you'll hear some commonality around that there may be an appetite. I think it'll probably be hard to stretch a long ways, but I think they should be willing to listen. The tax cut debate, we did a tax bill last year. We did conformity. We did a revenue-neutral tax cut bill. We lifted the exemption on Social Security taxes to exempt far more Minnesotans, and we did the first rate cut in over 20 years. What I don't want to do is repeat the mistakes that we've seen at the federal level, where you give a tax cut that's unpaid that has trillion-dollar deficits, leading to $22 trillion in debt, or what we witnessed in Minnesota, where we went $6 billion in the hole. When you're talking about a tax cut, this money is one-time money. When you're talking about a tax cut, there are tails, and if I heard right the other day, that the budget chair didn't even want to say what those tails were, like they don't exist. So I'm going to urge caution here. I'll wait and let the legislature work their will. I'm certainly willing to hear where we come from, but I remind you, the difference between November and now, that $181 million, is 0.2% of revenues. What you also saw in this was 0.2% of spending cut. The entire budget surplus is less than 2% of the overall budget. I would have to tell you, if you're doing your household budget and you're coming in at 2% of where it's at, you don't make massive changes based on that, especially where we see yellow flashing lights in an economy that was precluding COVID-19. There were already reasons to be cautious. I think now this reinforces what I have been saying, and I think we'll see is, let's be smart about this. Let's invest in things that make a difference.
The end of your remarks there that you might pay for a coronavirus response. Would that be in a supplemental budget? What would it look like? How much?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Again, I think this is for the legislature, and I want to thank them. It looks like right away there was a pretty bipartisan move on this. Folks started talking about it immediately. I think the one good thing here is when you build up trust, and I mentioned our budgetary staff that's here. I think that same thing goes with Minnesota Department of Health. I think that long reputation of being a very robust public health organization and very frugal with their budgets improves that. So I think we'll just have to wait and see. I think it's on the early end. The one thing I can say is, coming this afternoon at 1 o'clock and at 1:30, there will be briefings for the legislative leaders by MDH and leadership, and there'll be a press briefing to see where we're at and how we're stepping up our responses. But that's exactly the type of thing that a supplemental budget should be used for.
There was a OLA report on the state of the Corrections Department and prisons. It was a scathing report that suggested that a lot of money needs to be spent on things like data collection and analysis, on things like revamping the entire living units. Tons of money that could be spent there. Do you see putting some of this money at least toward that cause?
Yes.
Where would you focus it?
Yeah, I think so. Well, first of all, the top priority when it comes to corrections is protections of the citizens of Minnesota, protection of those correction officers, and the responsibility of protection of those that are incarcerated. You heard this. This is not surprising. We asked them to do this. I think some of you in here might have been through this. If you have not, trying to get you out there, and we're trying to be as transparent as possible in corrections of getting in there. It's stunning when you go in the Stillwater prison or the St. Cloud prison. It is stunning because Shawshank comes to mind when you see it. There is a mechanical arm that you turn that opens all the cells 5 layers high. This is so far outdated, and the sight lines in these prisons are so dangerous. And then the situations, especially with Joseph Gom and others, of where we see an increase in attacks on corrections officers and inmates. I do think that makes sense. And I think it's one of the things we're going to have to address it with that. But I can't stress again, we have got to move upstream and get away from the incarcerations that we have that can be disproportional, making sure that we're doing things to fix that part of it so that we're not in a situation, because it is so expensive to incarcerate someone, and our facilities in Minnesota are grossly outdated. So we welcome the report that I think sheds light on this, and I want to make note, my responsibility to those correction officers and keeping folks secure in Minnesota and to the incarcerated has to be paramount. So I can expect you can see us talking about that.
Governor, before you came in, we hammered your commissioner a couple of different ways on the coronavirus, and basically said, you know, there's something going on. There's a debt ceiling, there's a stimulus, an economic whatever. There's always an asterisk on this. Does the coronavirus to you, though, feel like a different kind of asterisk than those other asterisks?
No, it's a good question, and we asked this a lot. As I said, is this the black swan you're looking for? Is this now? I asked about the impact of the economy that SARS had. I asked about Katrina, and they're not the same. They don't look exactly the same because there's maybe a little more predictability. And actually, our economics experts said actually a hurricane, strangely enough, actually is an economic growth engine because of all the rebuilding that happens. That is not what's going to look like here. So what I can tell you is the economy, $21 trillion is big. The global interconnectedness, it's been a while since we've seen one like this. SARS maybe was the last one. I think it is prudent to keep an eye on that. I think maybe in an age because of Twitter and quick communications, it appears like people are talking a lot more about it. I think countries are taking this in a different way, and certainly Japan's interest is the Olympics and others. But before we came in here in the last hour, Japan just closed all schools in a country of 120 million people. That is a massive economic disruption in itself. So I do think keeping an eye on it, I do think the economists would tell you this over a long haul and a long period in this, that if that line gets long enough, the blip won't be enough. But I think the caution that we should feel in the economy, whether it was yield curves inverting, the other things that were starting to happen, it might not take much to push things. So I think for us, I think as an individual looking at this, taking this, that this can be, and we should take it from the individual basis, making sure we keep everyone safe, that it seems like it may absorb more space in the economy than it actually might in the long run. So we're watching it. It's another one of those things. We need to have the resources to direct it. But, I don't know if it's just timing, as the president believed that it had more to do with the Democratic debate than it had to do with coronavirus. I think that would probably be a pretty big stretch. But just so you know where we're at, after what's happening today on the stock market, this is the biggest loss since November of 2008, right before the. So I'm certainly not predicting that, but I'm saying we certainly have seen, I think we've entered correction territory. We're at about 10% now that changed this week. The good news is for Minnesota is we're going to control the things we can control. That's why I want to tell people stay in our lane and stay focused. Put the budget reserves back, use historically low interest rates and our strong position to invest in the things Minnesota need, and then invest in those things that no matter what happens to the economy in the short term is the recipe for growth, investing in our children in the workforce going forward. That's the place that I'm going to say we can't control what happens with global economy because of coronavirus. We will control the spread. We will control the public health. We will do what we need to do, and we will stay focused on those things that we can control that will create good economic situations.
Might be open to ongoing expenditures. Is that true? And is there a range, as opposed to one-time expenditures in your supplemental budget? Are you open to some ongoing appropriations?
I'm certainly open to listening to that. Yeah, I think so. And I hope after a year that you've seen this, I really try, because I respect the work that's going to come out of both the House and the Senate when they come together, that I think if I close the door on things with a emphatic no, it precludes our ability to do what we did last year. We compromised. Certainly I, signed on to things that I might not have advocated for them, but they were in the best interest of Minnesota as part of an overall package. So yes, I'm leaving that open.
One more question today.
May I return to the, go ahead.
This report shows a drop in the number of pupils and education spending. How might that have any bearing on your education?
Well, I think you always have to, as new information comes on, those first counts on how we do this, the per pupil spending, that's what happened there. I think it's interesting of this 181 million, it was split almost equally between the reduction in spending, mainly because the counts that we anticipated were not there. But I think long term we have a pretty good idea of what's going, and those expenditures that we're making for our children, the thinking that I'm seeing coming out of the legislature and businesses and all concerned Minnesotans is how do we make those smart investments and show results that come from it? So I don't think it necessarily changes where we're at. And again, I would caution folks, it's a big number. I don't make light of that, but it's less than 0.2% of the overall spending that was in there. So there's some anomalies that can go up and down. Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind me returning to the OLA report, Commissioner.
Sure.
One of the jarring things, one of the things that the OLA discovered, it wasn't part of the corrections data, was the extent of sexual abuse and harassment of the female employees. There are 1,400 female employees in corrections. How do you respond to that, and how are you going to direct a reaction to that?
Yeah, it's totally unacceptable, and I too took that as somewhat of the. It's all shocking. We have to get this right. I don't think there was much of a surprise on some of it that came out of that. This one is that we have to create an environment where everyone feels safe. We have to create structures. We have to create statutory barriers to make sure that every employee feels safe. And you're exactly right. As we have a hard enough time attracting corrections officers in, we need to make sure that every single person is able to do that job because they feel safe and they feel protected. So I think this is going to be a deep dive on this. I think we're having this conversation in the legislature too. What do we do about sexual harassment? What do we do about making people safe in the workplace? And I know the responsibility that I have is to make sure that the state of Minnesota is a model employer. And if we've got folks that are working in corrections that are not safe and the data supports that, we need to make sure that we're doing the things necessary to both change the culture, invest in safety, and get to the heart of that. So that is unacceptable. So, thank you all.
Is Chair Carlson's final budget setting forecast. He will be here for one more budget forecast in November before his term of service ends, but we're certainly going to miss his wise voice on these issues. With regard to the budget forecast, it's important to understand that that is a projected positive balance based on the budget that we set last year. And it's only a surplus in the true sense of the word if Minnesotans feel that we've invested all that we need to in education, healthcare, and families' economic security. We think that there are important investments yet to make in families, education, healthcare, and economic security. And so we view the projected positive balance as an opportunity to invest in Minnesota's families. It's also really important with the potential of a downturn in the future that we invest big in the bonding bill. I think the governor made a really good case for taking advantage of the incredibly low rates we have right now for borrowing. And with that, I will introduce Lyndon Carlson.
Well, thank you, and Madam Speaker, thank you for the kind comments. Yes, last November I did announce that this would be my final year in the legislature. That completes 48 years next December 31st, but thank you for that acknowledgement. Well, I was asked this morning in the Tax Committee to make a prediction about what the forecast would look like, and I said I didn't think there would be dramatic change because of having sat in on the November forecast, and I think that's what we see before us. There's some additional funding that's available moving forward permanently, and then a lot of one-time money. But my goal is not too different than what you've heard already. I think it's important that we have a vigorous bonding bill passed. This is a timely opportunity because interest rates are low. And so we'll be working closely, and that's with the other caucus, because that's the kind of bill that takes cooperation. You need 81 votes. But hopefully we'll have a robust bonding bill. And that's, I think, what the governor was saying. Some of you know that my background was in education. I was a teacher for 33 years. And one thing that I'm concerned about, and I would like to see some movement on, is the achievement gap, and I'm an absolute believer that part of the solution is in early childhood education. So this session, my last session, I hope we'll have a good bonding bill and that we can move forward on early childhood education along with some other issues. But personally, those would be a couple of my priorities, and I think we're well set with the forecast to do a lot of good things this legislative session.
Good afternoon. I just want to point out a couple of cautionary notes. We have everything in place, I think, to have a positive legislative session. Legislative leaders of both parties are willing to work together and having good conversations already on bonding, insulin, and all various other subjects. And I think we can get a supplemental budget that is helpful for Minnesota and do some of the things that Chair Carlson talked about and we've proposed in early childhood. But looking out in Minnesota's future, we have some trouble spots. First of all, if you put inflation in the forecast, as we should, we are looking at a $654 million deficit in the next biennium. So just to maintain the same level of services we have today, we are going to be short $650 million. Second of all, if you look at the workforce that Minnesota has, we are short workers for the jobs that we need to fill. And we're not going to be able to do that through a sudden population boost internally. We have to make Minnesota a more welcoming state for others to move in. We need to have immigration policies that welcome people into our state and make them feel integrated into our communities. Our communities need to be open to outsiders and bringing people in. And it's encouraging to see recent polling showing so many Minnesotans supporting refugees moving into Minnesota. A lot of our future is going to be tied up in bringing new people into our state and working together, functioning together better, as well as continuing our tradition of strong investments in education and healthcare to make sure that our existing workforce is as well prepared for the future as possible and is healthy enough to do the job. So looking out ahead, we have a real priority on public investments in health and education, and that is exactly what Minnesotans are saying we need to continue doing. So we feel good about our ability to meet this challenge, but there are some real challenges ahead.
Good afternoon. Before session, when we did one of our panels with the four leaders, we joked that there was a lot of kumbaya happening at that point. And I think you're going to continue hearing some of that, although there will, of course, be some parts of departure when I think you hear from the leaders of the other caucuses. As we've discussed, we have good news today in the forecast, but we also know that this is we need to protect fiscal stability for the state of Minnesota. The Senate DFL caucus has been committed to this throughout, and that stays today. We know that by keeping a solid, steady budget working, not going into structural deficits, we are able to do the business of the people of Minnesota and take care of the priorities that take care of our families and our futures. When we go into structural deficits, and we know because of potential economic downturns, and we know that just the projections, as Majority Leader Winkler just mentioned in terms of inflation, that we are looking at budget challenges in the out years. And so this is not the time to make drastic moves that would commit us into the wrong direction into the future. There are things we can do. A great bonding bill is something that we've all been talking about. We know that that is investment that is needed to be made into our communities, and we know that that will put people to work in really good jobs, and we need to be sure and do that. And with the budget supplemental opportunities, we've talked about the budget reserves, we've talked about making smart investments in our futures, and making sure that we continue to save for a rainy day, because it is something that we need to be prudent about. And with that, I would like to welcome Senator Ann Rest.
Thank you, Senator Ken. I'm going to be kind of the anti-kumbaya here. I do want to draw your attention in the booklet that you got to page 3, where the department calls to your attention what the forecast risks are. Consumer confidence, where people continue to buy at the rate that they're doing now. The financial market volatility that we're seeing with regard to the coronavirus that is making its way into our country. Our trade policy uncertainty with regard to the federal government, a prolonged and widespread virus outbreak, what we've already mentioned, and that we have 16 months to go before the end of this biennium. We do have a positive forecast, and we should make the most of it by being cautious, by setting our priorities that respect and value Minnesota's families, with regard to early education, as Representative Carlson mentioned, if we're going to do one-time spending other than maybe speeding up, paying back the reserve, that we do it in activities that reflect our values: early education, affordable housing, and certainly making our schools safe for all of Minnesota's children. So we have we're in a good point now, but we shouldn't waste it with reckless tax bills that are being promoted right now by the Senate Republicans, where they would spend almost this whole budgetary balance on unsustainable tax cuts. We should have a very serious conversation about the relationship of this budgetary balance with Minnesota's tax policy and not rush into anything. Thank you. First of all, we're trying to be really careful about not calling it a surplus, because sometimes what that indicates to people is that it's sustainable. And this is not sustainable because of inflation. And so if we're going to do any one-time spending other than paying back the budget reserve, which we're on a path to do anyway, out a couple of years, it seems to me that we need to be very, very restrained, maybe do things that are emergencies, like the governor was talking about in his remarks. But other than that, we need to be very careful, taking into account these risk factors, even though it shows that we're improved over November by some $200 million. So it's not really doom and gloom, but the uncertainties that are in our economy and in health scares, we can take care of those in Minnesota, but we need to be very cautious about overpromising what we can't deliver.
Madam Speaker, is there room for tax cuts, particularly exempting Social Security?
Right now, the vast majority of people who receive Social Security income in the state of Minnesota do not pay taxes on that income, and anybody who is solely dependent on their Social Security income does not pay taxes on that income in the state of Minnesota. But with regard to any proposals that we look at this year, what we will look at is the ongoing structural balance of the state budget. I think it was an important Mark Dayton budget legacy, and I think the shoulders that Governor Walz was talking about standing on was Governor Dayton and Commissioner Franz being very committed to not getting into a situation that Mark Dayton faced when he became governor in 2011. So we can't afford the size of proposals, the spending that Republicans are putting forward. And we especially can't afford a proposal to cut taxes that tilts towards people who are wealthier.
Madam Speaker, I'm sorry, did you just say the vast majority of Minnesotans who earn Social Security, don't pay taxes? Am I mistaken? I thought the number was about half pay something.
Well, the numbers given by the governor, which I'm going to assume are accurate at the pre-session presser, were that there's about $19 billion worth of Social Security income paid into the state of Minnesota, and $5 billion of that is taxed. And of that $5 billion that folks pay taxes on, those folks are overwhelmingly in the upper income categories.
But it is
so
about
I would say, I mean,
50%.
my rough math says that 75%. To me, that's vast majority.
Okay, I think that's the difference between dollar amounts and number of people. But.
Yeah, Senate tax lead.
Yeah, I believe, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think it's about 46% of Minnesotans that receive Social Security don't pay taxes on any of it. None of us that receive Social Security pay taxes on the first 15%. We have made 2 attempts over the last 4 years to achieve anti-bracket creep proposals, and there certainly are ways that we can help people who are in the lower income levels that are still struggling with paying taxes on their Social Security. But if you do a blanket exemption of all Social Security, I mean, I really don't see why we should feel any obligation whatsoever to people that have $300,000 in income, including Social Security, to exempt any of their income above that 15% that they too don't have to pay taxes on.
Speaker, won't you need to have some tax relief in it in order to make a deal with divided government? Because that seems to be a priority of the Senate.
I think any end of session deal on using the projected positive balance will have to have some elements that make Republicans happy and some elements that make Democrats happy.
Would full federal conformity be a piece that might make them happy that you would be okay with?
Well, we're at the very beginning of the tax conversation, and so our tax chair, I'm sure, will be diving into all the proposals on that front, and I think you can expect pretty good alignment between the administration and House Democrats.
Sorry, just going to follow up. The governor said that he was okay with open to some ongoing spending. What areas might you and the Senate Minority Leader be interested in seeing ongoing spending?
Well, for our caucus, we put a really big marker out there on early childhood education. We truly believe that when you look at the investments that we can make in the state of Minnesota, the investments that we make in people are the most important investments we can make, and the investments that we make in children between birth and age 3 are the most significant of all. So even if we can't make an ongoing commitment to next year's 3-year-olds, we know we have enough money to invest in this year's 3-year-olds. And we know if we do make those investments, that they'll carry the benefits of those investments with them for the rest of their life. So our highest priority would be early childhood education.
Madam Speaker, since you mentioned that the final deal is going to have to make both sides happy, if the price of getting what you want is too high, being the trade-off, are you willing to walk away and leave this money aside, given the caution that everyone's preaching today that maybe it's not prudent to spend it all?
Well, I think when you look at fiscal years 22 and 23, and that there is a projected deficit of $654 million, I think that there is definitely a benefit for Minnesotans to letting all the money fall to the bottom line.
You probably heard about the OLA report on corrections yesterday. I'm wondering if that puts a sense of urgency on the need to spend some money within corrections to correct some of the really serious problems that they uncovered in that study.
Well, I think the governor spoke very well to the intense need we have to invest in those facilities. You know, Chair Mary Murphy is requesting a large number for a target for GO bonding, and the reason why she wants a large target is that we can do that within our AAA bond rating, but also there is significant backup need out there. There are investments that we have neglected for years, and we have an accumulated backlog of investments that we need to make. And what Chair Murphy has suggested to Minority Leader Dowd is that let's go big this year, and then let's make a commitment to all of these state institutions that we are going to be there at a steady pace over the next several years so that they can stay caught up.
It would have been investments in data collection, massive levels of data collection. Is that something that you could see investing in this year?
It's nice that we have a positive, projected positive balance that we can take a look at doing some of those things.
Madam Speaker, the additional amount, and I realize it's a fairly small amount on a percentage basis in the surplus, but does this strengthen your resolve in terms of what the governor terms a robust bonding bill? And it sounds like you're going to be even more robust than he is, if we're understanding you correctly.
Well, I know Chair Murphy had one question at the forecast briefing, and her question was, do these numbers support a bonding bill of at least $3.5 million in general obligation bonds and $700 million in cash? And the answer she got from the budget professionals was yes. So that is the request I have from my chair.
And is that what the House is going to, what your caucus is going to bring forward, Madam Speaker?
We will just be starting the budget resolution setting process over the next 2 weeks. And then at the end of the 3rd week, I would expect around March 23rd, you'll see what our proposed budget is. We'll take a serious look at what the governor puts on the table on March 10th.
And I will just add from the Senate DFL perspective, and speaking specifically about the bonding side and the projected budget projection that we're looking at. Definitely looking at the budget reserves and making sure that we are on a good path to get that replaced quickly. And, you know, some of the things that we keep hearing about from around our state, all corners of the state, oftentimes from the business community, certainly the need for workforce housing and affordable housing. That is an area where you can see bonding being leveraged to get tax credits and private financing and other local financing, and to make a real difference that would help families and workers and employers, which would help address some of these challenges that our state is seeing in terms of the work of our overall economic capabilities being hampered by some of these workforce issues. I had someone in my office just yesterday from a construction firm who specifically said that they can't take on as many jobs as they want to, as they would like to be able to, because they do not have the people available to do that work. And so that is where our focus needs to be. It needs to be on the kinds of things that help lift the economic engine of Minnesota so that we are strong moving forward into the future. Bonding is a huge part of that. I think we do have a really unique opportunity to do something pretty special that can make a real difference in Minnesotans' lives across the state. But also, you know, looking at these opportunities where we can make a difference without putting us into structural deficits.
Madam Leader, if I may, just a quick follow-up in your conversations with Senator Gazelka on this, because obviously he needs you folks' support to do this. Is the $2 billion that the governor is proposing what you're telling him it needs to be at, or does it need to be higher than that, or what kind of conversation are you having with him?
What I'll say at this point, and this has included also the Speaker and the Minority Leader in the House, is we are having really good conversations about starting this process, and that we are going to work together. And I think we are all cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to do this in a healthy way and avoid some of that end of session process that we've seen in the past. And I'm really committed to that myself. But at this point, we're not going to talk about specific numbers and where we are.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. The budget forecast came out, and it's $1.5 billion. It's a little bit more than where it was. But what it says to us is we should stay the course of the proposals that we're doing. So we talked about the fact that last year we passed a 2-year budget that funded everything, and then the reserves are full, and with the rest we said let's give the rest of that money back. We came out with give $1 billion back, and so we're going to focus on that just to highlight the 3 areas that we're going to keep working towards. One is fully exempting Social Security income. We think that is a huge priority that would benefit many people in Minnesota. They shouldn't have to pay earning that income all the way through, and then suddenly we're going to charge it again. We're one of 13 states to do that, and so we want to do our best to fully exempt that. The second one the technical term is Section 179, but really it's relief on the tax code for small businesses and the agriculture community. When they buy equipment, the federal government allows them to expense it up front. Minnesota doesn't, and so we want to conform to the federal government. That could infuse small business and agriculture with more resources to do the jobs they do. And finally, our third priority was to lower the lowest income tax level, and that helps everyone. Everybody first pays through that phase, and then they go into the next income tax, and the more you make, then you go into the next income tax and pay part of that. But everybody benefits from that, but certainly the people that are on the bottom, that would help a lot too. And so we're excited about this. If it had gone the other way, it just makes it much more difficult. Now we have to work. The governor has some of his priorities, and the House will have priorities, but we want to lay out where our priorities are. The bonding bill is still on track. There's no reason that we can't have a bonding bill that we all agree with. We're talking about trying to set dates ahead of time to actually have a full process. But with the news today, it didn't get any more difficult. I think we have a path to make sure we finish well for Minnesota. So.
Well, thank you all for coming out. Obviously, very good news for Minnesota today. The message for us is, for Democrats and for the governor, is not whether or not we'll have a tax bill, but how big will that tax relief bill be. We've got a $1.5 billion surplus. We've got a structural surplus in the tails. It's time to make sure that we honor our commitment to Minnesotans and give them some of their money back. We're collecting too much from them. That will also be good for Minnesota's economy. It'll help grow Minnesota's economy, which in turn will help bring in additional tax revenue. So it's the right thing to do, not only for Minnesotans, but it's good public policy. Next week, House Republicans will put out our tax proposal. It will look a lot like the Senate Republicans' proposal. We'll be proposing to fully exempt Social Security income from state income tax. Now is the time to do that, and with this surplus in the tails, we can afford to do that and to do it permanently. And we think that's a very, very important thing to do for Minnesota seniors and those who will be approaching retirement age soon. So it's our top priority, and there's no reason now not to do it. You'll also see things like a child care tax credit, and we also want to help our farmers and small business owners who are being hurt by not conforming with that federal tax code. We want to give them the help that they need. So this really is good news, and frankly, we stand united with Minnesotans in wanting to honor and give them some tax relief back, put it into their pockets and their family budgets. So that's going to be our priority. We'll have a press release and a press conference on Tuesday announcing our tax package from the Minnesota House Republicans.
Questions?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Wait, there's just more. Want to give a little fiscal side. I'm Julie Rosen, Senator Rosen, Chair of the Finance Committee, and it's a relatively consistent, somewhat boring change in the forecast, a 0.04% change from November, which is good. But I just want everybody to just caution on making sure that we prioritize our financial and our fiscal responsibilities and not spend beyond our means. It's easy to start thinking about spend, but actually I think hopefully there is a consensus to really just do one-time funding of areas that are special, and we need to do a very strong tax bill. I think that's important. One of the areas that is a one-time funding is the disaster account, which will be coming to the Finance Committee next week. That's extremely important to get some money into that. We have a deficit in there. We need to keep it funded for the potential flooding that's going to happen this spring all over the state. And then we're also going to be passing out from the Finance Committee to the floor the Rural Finance Authority bill for bonding up to $50 million, another very, very important piece. And of course, as the majority leader and the minority leader said, we're going to do a reasonable bonding bill. So with that, I want to just send out a signal to all the agencies. Just because we have a surplus doesn't mean we stop on our reforms, and there are accountability on how we're spending the taxpayers' money. I think that's extremely important. We have to keep in mind, too, of the volatile market news recently with the virus that's happening. And so we should be cautious, and we should keep those reserves that we have in place fully funded going forward.
Questions?
Speaker of the House already said that you can't afford the size of the tax cuts you want to do.
Well, they typically, we focus on controlling spending, and if you control spending, then you can afford to give tax relief back the way we're describing, and so that's going to be the great debate, but we do think we can afford it.
What's going to be the legislative response to the potential of the coronavirus outbreak that's spreading? I know that Senator Ralph has introduced legislation to infuse $5 million into an account, but just wondered, given the uncertainty over that in the forecast raised today, what should legislators be doing?
I mean, frankly, that's a good, very good question. And the fact that Senator Ralph is carrying $5 million for resources, we're saying let's just be prepared. I've met with the governor and the speaker as far as what is the Minnesota response going to be, but we feel like there should be resources available, so we're going to lead on that.
Yes, there is a recent news about a potential outbreak in Minnesota recently, and I believe Senator Benson is meeting with the commissioner and the state. She's been talking with the state epidemiologist extensively. We are going to have a hearing on this next week, along with the $5 million from the Senator Ralph's bill. There is potential of funding from the feds. I think over $2 billion, the president mentioned. So I believe, along with the governor's initiative, we're on the right course. But the Senate Republicans absolutely are taking this very serious.
To follow up, how quickly do you anticipate some of those bills might pass, given just how quickly the situation's unfolding?
That's a very good question. I think we could be very nimble. if we have to spend that money immediately, is something like the disaster account, we could take it to the floor right away.
Let me add one more thing. One more thing on the coronavirus too is Minnesota is more prepared than other places. I mean, we have facilities already in place as a result of SARS. Like I said, the governor and myself and the speaker and both minority leaders had a conversation about this. So we're aware of it and we're proactive, and I think that's good for Minnesota.
What about the numbers now? They're 20 days old, so that's before quite a bit of this coronavirus spread. Are you concerned that the numbers really aren't accurate because of that?
Well, the numbers are growing, which means we want to be precautionary about this. We also want to give a sense of calmness. I don't think.
The budget forecast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Budget forecast
Sorry.
numbers, being that they're 20 days old, I don't know how much they have forecasted CDC.
Yeah. So start over and repeat it as for the budget.
Budget forecast numbers are based from 20 days ago, so they don't have the last few weeks of the coronavirus spread and some of the economic impact in that. So I wonder if that increases your concern and the volatility.
I do not think it would change it dramatically. We had a conversation about that with the governor's staff. There's a number of variables that they consider when they look at the risk. And so I think we're on the right path with where we should be. Typically, they're conservative in how they make their decisions, and I think we're in a good spot.
Senator, not to get ahead of the game, but I asked the Speaker today what an end of session deal might look like, meaning will there have to be some sort of tax relief in it?
She said yes, right?
And she said yes.
Yeah.
She said,
so we're good.
Well, she said what you often said, what you had divided government, there has to be something in that makes them happy and something in that makes you happy.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, will there be some spending in it as well along the lines of what the House is looking at?
So very good question, and already the fact that our finance chair, Julie Rosen, talked about the fact that we're doing disaster relief. What was the second one?
The RFA.
Yeah, so we're doing two things right away. Those are already spending issues that we're agreeing on and moving forward. As we find those, we'll move them forward.
Well, I think she means more than the things that everyone appears to agree on, things like broadband and RFA and disaster relief.
We got to agree on them first, and so these are things that we actually have agreed to for spending. They've talked about 179 as a possibility, and this is where we have to move the pieces together that we can all agree on. But the fact that we're communicating and really talking about similar issues tells me we're going to get to a good finish. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to negotiate with you.
Sure,
So.
You'd win.
Yeah. I'm not so sure.
But say early childhood scholarships, that's a Republican issue in the past. Is that something that's potentially in our...
Certainly we will consider. We made a list of all the different things that we thought, is this something that we need to take a look at? Senator Rosen visited with all the chairs about are there areas that some were missed or that we may need to do something, and so that's the great conversation that we're having now.
The tax cuts that you rolled out last week, do you know how much those are going to cost and how much of this surplus, how big a percentage those are?
I do. I can give you, well, within the ballpark. I don't have the tax chair here, but Section 179, the ag and small business expense relief, was somewhere near 140 to 150 million in the first year, and then it went down to like 10 or 15 million after that, and we can try to give you the exact number on that. Exempting all of the Social Security income was around 400 million, and that would continue near that number. The rest of them I can't give the details. Some of them are quite small, but those are two of the big ones.
The income tax cut?
I don't have the numbers on that.
The governor and the speaker say that only a small fraction of Minnesotans currently pay taxes on Social Security income anyway. Do you agree, disagree?
Well, like I said last time, if you, as a married couple, are above 60,000, you start paying some of your Social Security is taxed. And so is there a way that we can make sure that it's fully exempt? Well, I think we can. I think that's the direction we're going to aim. I think seniors, when they hear that we want to fully exempt it, all of them give us the thumbs up.
I can jump in on that too. When I was speaker, we raised the limit of what was exempted on Social Security, and we thought that was a big step. We didn't, at the time, have the money to do it completely, and we couldn't get agreement from the Democrats to do it completely. But we can afford it now, and frankly, we're one of a very few states that taxes Social Security income. And this isn't a time to pit one group of people against another. This is a time to do something that's right for those that are either in retirement age or nearing retirement age. We shouldn't be taxing Social Security income. It's bad public policy, and frankly, those seniors could use that additional money in their family budgets. So we feel pretty strongly about that. We can afford to do it now in this, and frankly, we should get it done.
Just to be clear, I believe it's $491 million that to go back into the rainy day fund. You guys support doing that?
So the reserves will be full all the way till, I believe, July of 2021 if we do nothing. So the governor is talking about making sure that it stays at that number and doing legislation this year. That will be the conversation that we're going to have. The other direction we could go is as we have surpluses, it just begins to fill up again. And so we do believe that it's wise for Minnesota to make sure that there's a rainy day fund, that it's in an economic downturn, we're ready for it. But there's also some other priorities that we want to weigh out. Is it more important to get Social Security fully exempted, for example, is something we want to at least have a conversation about.
Because you're not committing to that in
Correct.
the future at this point. And with regard to Social Security, $400 million a year, very quickly, and according to the Tales of this forecast, we no longer have a deficit, especially if you include inflation. No longer have a surplus, especially if you include inflation. And so obviously, you know what, well, I've just given the Democrats point on that.
Yeah, and we haven't used inflation for decades and decades. And frankly, if you look at the overall growth of government, it has grown quite a bit above inflation. So I say we want to make sure that we're watching our spending too. That's part of our responsibility as the legislative body and the governor is make sure that we're not overspending. That's our side of that story.
On that point, the rigidity that these tax cuts would imply, the fact that it is not a one-time measure, but that it's an ongoing commitment, what does that mean in terms of even factors like the coronavirus, if that in fact flares up to be a bigger deal than what is currently projected?
So our budget is over $48 billion, and we make choices every day and every year about where we spend money and where we provide tax relief. And if the coronavirus is more than we think it's going to be, we will find resources. I'm not worried about that at all. But to give tax relief to seniors, we think is a high priority. As we mentioned, only 13 states tax Social Security income, so I'd like to be one of the states that does not do that. The House Republicans agree, and if we can work towards getting the governor and the speaker to agree with us, we'll get that done.
Mr. Leader, along that same area, the governor said he has a lot of concerns about the tails in terms of tax cuts and possibly forcing the state into a deficit situation in the future, because your tax cuts would be a permanent or ongoing tail.
Yes.
How do you respond to that?
I have a lot of concern about the ongoing spending increases that automatically happen, and how do we control our spending. And so there's two sides of that equation, tax relief and spending, revenue coming in, versus spending going out. And we are concerned about the spending. If you look at where we were, I believe in the beginning of Governor Dayton's time, we were at somewhere around $34 billion. Now we're getting ready to hit $50 billion. And so how do we watch our spending is what we're going to push. And the two sides collide, and that's where we have to figure out, what is the solution moving forward. I do believe we'll find a solution. Just like last year, we passed a 2-year budget that balanced and took care of all of our needs, and we provided tax relief then. We got a middle-class income tax bracket cut for the first time in almost 2 decades. So we can do more of that while we balance a budget.
In the bonding area, the governor said plenty of money for a robust bonding bill. He's used that term before. Asked him, can we go over the $2 billion? He said, well, we might be able to stretch. We'd like them, in other words, I assume Republicans, to listen to that. And Speaker Hortman isn't saying a number, but you know the number they're tossing around as my voice goes out here. What is that any possibility to get anywhere near what the governor's talking about?
We're going to find a spot that we can all agree on, and we're all committed to that. We've never had a general obligation bonding bill over $1 billion. They're proposing $2 billion and $3.5 billion. And so we're going to find a number that we can all agree on, and I think you'll find all 4 leaders working together and then working with the governor after that. But there is a lot of dialogue among the House and Senate, Democrats, Republicans, to work towards a good bonding bill for Minnesota. You should expect it to get done early, and the number, we'll just have to wait and see.
Will it be somewhere between 1 and 2? I mean, is that, it's kind of sense.
Those are the 2 numbers.
Yeah, obviously, they need our votes to get this out of the House, and the bonding bill has to start in the House. So, I've been very vocal that we're not setting a hard and fast limit on what it should be. But just to put it into perspective, the bonding bill, the biennial average for bonding is about $1 billion for almost the last 20 years. So for us to go to $2 billion, to double the biennial average, or $3.5 billion, and I'll remind you that the House proposal is $3.5 billion in general obligation bonds and another $700 million in cash. So $4.2 billion. I mean, we're talking about multiple times what the biennial average has been. What we care more about is what the projects are. We want to make sure that we're investing in the infrastructure that Minnesotans think is important: transportation infrastructure, water infrastructure, taking care of our state assets, our buildings, those sorts of things. We want to put together a bill that has a good mix of those things and regionally important infrastructure that Minnesotans can get behind. And I would look for a bill more in that based on what's in it. As far as the number itself, is there a chance we could go above $1 billion? There is a chance we could. Is there a chance it's near $2 billion? Probably not.
Senator Gazelka, there was a stark report from the OLA about corrections yesterday. You may not have seen it yet. It's not scheduled yet for a Senate Judiciary hearing. However, it tells us that we don't know how safe prisons are. We know that there's sexual misconduct toward female employees. We know that there's violence. We know that there's a culture of bullying. We just don't know to what degree those things exist. And it's calling for a massive increase in spending to produce data so that those things can be assessed and safety can be implemented. Is that something you could see investing in this year with this budget?
So I have not read the report, but I do appreciate the Office of the Legislative Auditor, and we will look at that. I'm sure Senator Limmer will look at that. We're not ruling out all spending, and so we're taking a look at each one separately, and certainly public safety is a big area that we're talking about, and we'll take a sincere look.
He's got a briefing on coronavirus.
I just want to chime in on this one quickly. It has been, the Corrections Department has asked for more money and more money to add on and build new prisons. We have a prison in Appleton, Minnesota that is state-of-the-art, that is certified and ready to take inmates right now, and it's sitting empty, completely empty. So our position has been, and I hope it continues to be, that before we spend more money on bricks and mortar, adding on to prisons, that we take advantage of an asset that I think the state could acquire at pennies on the dollar, probably, and utilize that facility. And it would also bring much-needed jobs back to an area that lost a lot of jobs when that prison was closed. So,
it seems a little peripheral to the issue that they're identifying.
Well, I read the Pioneer Press article on the front page today that said that they're asking for all kinds of money to improve the Stillwater prison. So if I got that wrong, I apologize. But they're asking for money to build prisons, and hopefully before they do that, they'll take advantage of the prisons that we already have that are sitting empty in the state of Minnesota.
Thanks, guys.
Sorry, I just wanted to make that.